welcome back to another book related video here on my channel. Today we are going over technically January and February's monthly wrap up, only because I read and finished one book in January and started another one but didn't finish it till February 1st. And also we are going to do March's TBR. Let's go ahead and get into the 10 books I've read in the last 2 months. I have my book journal with me. Actually, it's a book binder. I have a bunch of pages I made and then printed out, and I wanted to do a tally at the end of how many days I've read, and then also I want to share all the pages that I did read, the amount that I did read. First book we're going to talk about is Nicholas Sparks' True Believer, and I rated this 3 stars. It has 322 pages, and at the time I was really into it until I got a couple books for a book haul, and then I got really excited to read those, so I started not liking this. It was a good book. I mean, it just wasn't something that I wanted to read a lot of, and apparently this is number 1 in a series, which at first sight is the second book that you're supposed to read, but I read that book first many years ago. I did read this book second, which I could see where it would have been better to read this book maybe first and then go with the second one, but since I totally forgot about At First Sight, it was okay going into this book second. Next we have Midnight Sun, and I read all of the Twilights in end of November to December, and I thought this was an added-on book. I didn't know it was in Edward's point of view, but Twilight itself. So with that, because I was so excited to start reading it, I went into it, and this is the book that I didn't finish till the 1st of February because it has 658 pages. I started reading late into January, and when I finally finished this, I was trying to finish it before the end of the month, but of course, I've read the last 200 pages on the 1st. So I will say I did rate this one 3 stars, and that's because I liked it more technically than Twilight. I liked Edward's point of view more, but I was almost going into a slump with this book because I thought it was added on to Twilight and not the same story, just in a different perspective. But I did like the little bit of insights the book gave with like people's past history and how Edward can read minds and things like that. So I did enjoy it just a smidge, but I was kind of bored at the same time. But when I actually would pick it up, I would get into it and read 50, 100 pages at one time, if I had the time for it. We then read To All the Boys I Loved Before, and I rated this one 3 stars as well. I was not big on the overall lie in the beginning and then like the fake dating, because in my mind that's still kind of like a lie. So I did enjoy how fast-paced, how big the text was, and also different fonts for text message, and it also had different fonts for her letters, which I thought was really cool, and I enjoyed this book. It was a very fast-paced read. I got into this very quickly. It wasn't bad at all. It was just a little bit not one of my favorite books just because I didn't enjoy the lying, even if it wasn't that big of a deal. To All the Boys I Loved Before has 355 pages. Next we have P.S. I Still Love You with 337 pages, and this book was the 4-star book of the whole series. I enjoyed it a lot more. I felt like I liked them more as dating when they weren't necessarily fake dating, but they were being legitimate about it and they weren't necessarily lying, and I kind of liked the things that went on. There was a couple things that I wasn't too big on, but for the most part I enjoyed like the little bit of like drama or events that did happen. I thought it was pretty good, pretty fast paced as well. I read this book I think in 2 days because I got a little busy and I wanted to clean the house and stuff. I definitely enjoyed this one the most. And then lastly, at 325 pages, we have Always and Forever, Laura Jean. And this book, I'm not gonna lie, I had a very hard time kind of getting into it. It was I think around 100 pages because it was all of a sudden we fast forward, we skipped a lot. They were getting ready for college, they were in their last year of high school, and I did not enjoy this book as much. This was another 3 stars, and the main reason I didn't enjoy it was the back and forth, potential breaking up and then getting back together. That also happened in the end of the second book, and after they stayed together it was potentially them breaking up because of them going to college, and I didn't care much for that because I don't believe that you have to break up in order to go somewhere. I believe in long distance relationships, and this book just kind of bugged me with how they were talking about that. I felt like some things were really dragged out and then other things were real fast paced. It wasn't bad. I finished it in a whole day, but I think would have been okay with maybe it all summed up into an epilogue. I did like how some events were more drawn out, so you did get to hear a couple different things, but for the most part I felt like a really long epilogue would have been okay with this whole book. And with this whole series, I did happen to go on Netflix and watch the 3 movies, and I'm not going to necessarily talk about them because they are nothing like the books, besides like the original plot of her letters that she wrote being sent out. I felt like that was pretty much the only thing that the movie did correctly. Everything else was totally wrong and backwards, so I did not enjoy the movies, to be honest, but I enjoyed the books a lot more. I think overall as a series, this would probably be a 3-star series for me. At 303 pages, we then have Tatiana de Rosnay's A Secret Kept. And going into this, I thought the whole book was completely different. I thought it was about a teenager running away from her problems and she had like a secret. And I did not realize that it was actually about people's mother and what the big secret was. It was a pretty fast-paced book. I really enjoyed it. I love her books, except for because she is French. She has a lot of French in her books, so there's a lot of places that I had trouble pronouncing, so it took me a little bit longer to read this book. This was a 4-star read and I really enjoyed it. And then we get into Agatha Christie's And Then There Are None. This is 204 pages long, and the first probably 20 or 50 pages I kind of struggled getting into it because there was multiple POVs, and at first I thought the whole book was going to be like that. It basically was just POV until you learned about the person, and then it became third person for the most part. And I enjoyed this book a lot. Honestly, this was a 5-star read. This was my first 5-star of the whole year. It was very fast paced and it was just very fun to read, and it kept you on your toes. And at the very end, I thought I knew who it was. There's this extra thing that happens and I'm like, oh, I was wrong. And because of that, it's definitely 5 stars because I did not know technically who it was up until the very end. Next we have The Unhoneymooners, and this was my first technical kind of romance. I've only ever read Nicholas Sparks books or Christian romance, so this was my first true romance that I've seen all over TikTok, all over BookTube, everything like that. It's only 395 pages. I felt like I read this in a day, maybe 2. I think I read it in 2 days. It was very fast. There were text bubbles for the text messages that help you kind of go really quick through the book. There wasn't that many of them. Font and everything like that was really easy to read, pretty big, and I liked, for the most part, the whole book. I gave this book 4 stars, and that's also because it wasn't something that was 5-star material, but it was not bad at all. I really enjoyed it. I continued to read it for hours a day. A lot of people apparently sided with the main character here on BookTube, and a lot of people said that they didn't like Ethan. And I'm the opposite. I tend to do that apparently because I felt like the main character was just over dramatic, and also at the end I kept saying that it was basically the boy cried wolf situation because she would always be so negative, and then people just assumed. And I will give her the benefit of the doubt when it comes to something that happens at the end with Ethan and his brother, and I kind of thought like, oh well, if you guys are dating, Ethan should have believed you. But at the same time, in my opinion, I can understand why maybe he wouldn't if you were put into his shoes, and not necessarily that he didn't believe her, it's just that he didn't want to believe her. So because of that, I can understand some people's point of views with that, but my opinion on this book is I did not care much for the main character. Overall, this was a very fast-paced and good read as well, so 4 stars for that. Second to last book we have is The Hotel Nantucket. This has 368 pages, but this book from about 20 pages in or so really started picking up. I felt like in the beginning I was kind of confused on what this book was going to be about, but in the end I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool, and I guessed wrong also on who was this big Instagram celebrity type person who went around reviewing hotels. I had an idea, and then I thought it was correct because I figured it wouldn't even be a female, it would be a guy, and I thought I was correct, and then all of a sudden I was completely wrong. It still was a female in the end. I rated this one 4 stars, not just because of how I didn't guess who was the Instagram blogger, but also because it just was really easy to read, and I kept reading a lot. I would read probably 100 pages at a time, and I feel like I enjoyed sitting down reading this, getting to hear all the different point of views, even though you're still kind of in third person, but also getting to understand the ghost Grace who's at this hotel. I liked the history from it, even though there were some parts of it that kind of repeated just a little bit, but it wasn't too much where it annoyed me where I didn't want to read the book anymore. I ended the month on a 5-star read, and this book I seen in Barnes & Nobles, and I told my husband that I wanted it, but we did not get it. And then later on I went to a thrift store on base and found it with 5 other books and only paid $1.12 for all 6 books. And I have the full series with me, but this is Fable. I feel like nobody honestly talks about this book. I've seen people talk about it because of how beautiful the covers are, but that's as far as they get. Like, they don't ever talk about how they loved it or didn't like it, or if they read it or not. This published in 2020, I do believe, so it's not too old of a book, and I feel like more people should have talked about it. I feel like it's probably because it's YA and fantasy. I'm not 100% sure, but that would be my guess, because from page 1, literally the first sentence, and this is page 1, it's very, very small. You are already into technically a sense of like adventure, and into this book you jump in, like you leap into this book and you're already in a world and you're getting it described, and it's not too bad. I followed along really easily, and it might be because it's YA, it might not be. This book really had me reading it very quickly, and I wanted to read the whole book for hours, and I was just so much into this world. It was so amazing to read it, and I've heard a couple reviews where people have rated it 5 stars as well. They read so fast that they read it all in one whole sitting, and I did not do that. I read it over the course of a couple days. This book was a 5-star read, and it had 353 pages in it. Very, very good, but a little hint, if you are going to read this book, be sure to pick up the second one because it does end on a cliffhanger, and I love that about this book. I feel like I haven't gotten that in a while. I feel like sometimes they end on a small cliffhanger, but this one was a little bit more of a big one. And it's very interesting, and I have to say I enjoyed this book. There is a smidge of romance, I guess you could say, in it. Not just the covers are beautiful. This one thing that I don't like about hardcovers nowadays is the fact that most books aren't beautiful, but this book, even the book itself, it has the normal lettering on the spine that most books have, but it also has one little thing. I know Divergent has this. All this whole series has this as well. So you got the most beautiful covers because they make a whole face, and then you got the books. Like I said, books hardly do that anymore. In fact, just looking at even the Hotel Nantucket, we only have a white book with just lettering on the spine. And same with To All the Boys I Loved Before. This is the third one, but the second one for some reason went really cheap, and they don't even have lettering on the spine. It's a plain blue and white book. But I wanted to bring that up because books used to be very, very beautiful. I collect a lot of old books. I love reading them because I had a neighbor who I ended up getting a lot of her books. And this is from the 1920s, potentially to the 30s. I'm not sure what edition I have. So this is a really old book. You can tell by just the dust jacket alone. But this book is one of my most beautiful books itself. You can see on the spine, it is very beautiful, and it has like a little bit of font right here, and I feel like books need to bring this back. Like if you're gonna make a hardcover, I don't know if it's the author or just the publisher, but if you're gonna make a hardcover, put some like decorative on the spine or just extra stuff on the cover. I feel like it just makes everything so much better. The spines are absolutely beautiful in older books, and in new books, I feel like they're just so plain and boring. They only have the title and also the author and potentially the publisher. They don't have much, and like I said, some books don't even have them. So I wanted to bring that into the light just because this book was very beautiful. Now let's go ahead and get into my TBR for next month. I feel like this TBR is going to be very calm and not too much reading. I'm gonna try and chill a little bit because my goal for the year is only 25, and I'm already at 10 finished books, and I'm almost finished on one other book. So I'm almost at 11. I'm almost halfway through my goal already. And technically it's only March 1st today. Of course, because I read Fable, Namesake is the second book in the series, and I will be reading this. I want to eventually get the first book. Well, technically it's 0.5 on Goodreads. It's the same length as these. It's over 300 pages, but it's not a novella, or it is a novella. It's called Saint, and it's about her father, and I want to get that eventually and read that. But for right now, I just have Namesake. Like I said, you've probably seen these together because they make a really pretty photo. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're also like a felt for the dust jacket, and this book has different stuff on the actual hardcover itself. I am over 150 pages into this book. There's 300 and I think 50 pages, so I might be below just half. I'm going to probably finish this either today or tomorrow, and then I'll pick up the third book in the series and finish it off with The Last Legacy. We'll have to see what this one is truly about. I don't want to read it just in case there's any spoilers on the back for me personally, so I have not looked into it. I've just reading one and then picking up this next one and reading that one. Afterwards, we have 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand. This has apparently over 400 pages, but I've heard a lot of great things about this book. I haven't heard any spoilers or anything like that, but a lot of people have read her books, and I don't know if it's just because of who the author is or if it's because they're really good books. So I think on Goodreads this has a 4-star rating. It might be a high 3 though. I also want to pick up Max Lucado's 6 Hours One Sunday. This is just a Christian book. I want to read it and finish this since it has been sitting for a while. And then also another recent one that I just picked up is Tom Clancy's Oath of Office. Except for the Fable series, I'm not going to read these in the order that I just showed you. I'm just going to pick random what I feel like, and I might even pick different ones for my bookshelf. So I do have this one. If I get to it and I can read it, then that's great. If I don't, then I'll just save it for another TBR later. Those are the books that I read in both January and February, and also my March TBR. I hope you guys enjoyed this video so much. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see y'all next week, and God bless.